before we even get into this, I would like to say that there is no amount of telling yourself how stupid you are and how incapable you are and how slow you are that is actually going to help you shift these behaviors within yourself. Because you're only going to be down further on yourself. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. So the question is, what can we do about it? How can we go about it? How can we gently support ourselves? Good morning and happy Sunday. I hope you're well. My name is Linda and usually this is a sewing channel, but today I'm doing something a little bit different. I want to share something that I've been contemplating and sort of working on myself, which is toxic work habits or toxic work mindset that I have. And I'm taking a very gentle approach to addressing this issue. Frankly, I'm just very, very tired of trying to push through, and I feel like there's a different approach to all of this, and maybe some of you might be working on this or running up against the same barrier that I am. So let's try and figure this out together as best as we can. I'm just, sharing from my experiences doesn't mean that it will work for you, could work for you. Take what works for you and what resonates and just leave the rest. If this is not for you, then, it's not for you. There are a million different resources out there. Then I wish you good luck in finding something that works. So let's get into this. So perhaps let's start with talking about what I mean when I say toxic work mindset that I personally have, right? We're talking from my perspective here. And it is that I have a mindset where nothing is ever really good enough, and I feel like I've never done enough either. So it is not great for working, but it's also not great for resting, because if you always feel like you haven't done enough, even when you're resting, you tend to feel incredibly guilty, or I tend to feel incredibly guilty even when I'm resting. Like right now, for example, I'm on vacation and I took some well-earned time off, but it took me a few days to actually calm down and not feel like I should be doing something. Just properly resting is actually very, very difficult for me. And it comes out in a lot of different behaviors. Like, for example, my channel usually is a sewing channel, or I make clothes mostly. I do some home decor as well. Like basically anything you can sew, I'm sewing. But it does take me a long time to get out a video or get to posting, because I'm overly perfectionist, and it's not healthy for me, and I would really like to kick this habit this year. It's I know where it comes from. We're going to go into the root issue of it as well, from my perspective, and I'm also going to leave you with a couple of journaling questions so that you can do some introspection on this if this is something that you're affected by, something that you would like to change about yourself, so we can figure it all out together. Okay, so let's dive into the behaviors of where this little monster tends to creep up for me. First, a sip of tea. This behavior comes up mostly as an overcritical inner voice that is having a very negative view on anything that I'm producing. And that is sometimes actually making it difficult to produce at all, where even before I start, it feels like it's not going to be good enough, so why even start? I feel like for me, I've overcome that, but that was a huge problem sometimes, even with sewing, where I would stand in front of my shelf with all of my fabrics. Is right there with all of my fabrics, and I would look at it and be so paralyzed by making a mistake and doing something wrong, because if you cut into fabric, like there's nothing that you can do to undo that, right? Where it would be so bad that I would even get paralyzed with sewing a piece, just picking a project. Yeah, this is how deep this went, and I've been working on this for a good amount of years now, actually, where this is not an issue anymore, but the root cause of it that is connected to this is, of course, being afraid of making a mistake. Yeah, so that's at the center of it. At the center of being overly perfectionistic is feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like I'm not good enough, and feeling like I'm not allowed to make any mistakes. So from there on, we will go a bit deeper, but let's look at other behaviors where this comes out. This comes out as well in interactions with other people, where if I'm talking to them or I say something where I feel like I could have done a bit better, or I could have been a bit more sensitive, or you know, at work I could have done a bit more, I didn't do enough. That's mostly, it's like, it's not enough. Even if I work like 10-hour days, sometimes I feel like it's not enough, and it's not good. It's not good, it's not healthy. So you know, because the thing is, I have developed a lot of different techniques on how to basically train my mind to work against that, to have a different perspective of what I'm producing as well. And one thing where it comes out, which is really interesting, and which is why as well I think this is a good time to make this video, is because this YouTube channel for me, it's very young. Like, I've only have a few videos up, and I noticed this pops up so badly when I'm editing videos, because I've never done this before. Okay, I've never edited videos before. If you go back, like, these are the first videos I've ever made. Like, I have no prior experience to this whatsoever, and I'm literally sitting at my desk, and I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job for somebody who's never done that before, if I'm honest with myself. But the voice the voice is judging me on not getting something right, on not having the perfect cutting, on not, also there's construction, by the way, so if you hear that, I'm really sorry. It's loud right now. On not getting the cutting right, on not knowing how to properly color grade, on not knowing right now how to properly do the audio with the tool that I have right now. I need to just, you know, learn this. It's a skill. The more videos I do, the better I get, and I know that, but yet I'm still sitting at my desk and doing this and trying to edit, and I am pissed off to the absolute max at myself that I am so slow. That it takes me so long to do a video, to film. First of all, filming, also I've never done that before, you know, with like finding the right angles and all of this. And worst part for me is doing intros. I don't even know why. It's literally just sitting down and say hello. It's difficult. After this, everything is fine, but intros are my nemesis. My personal nemesis are intros. And I'm sitting there and I'm so angry at myself for taking a bit longer, because sometimes I need to look things up, or it takes me a while, you know, and it's like, that's one way of going about it. The other way would be to be happy that I'm developing a new skill. Because with sewing as well, you know, that's why it's absurd to me, because sewing, I've been sewing for so many years now, like more than 10 years. So everything I'm doing has this much routine because I've been practicing it for 10 years, right? But somehow, somehow this mindset doesn't translate to, let's say, editing or something like this, or something in the workspace where I'm doing things for the first time, you know? So I need to be more patient with myself. 100% need to be more patient with myself. But there is, of course, the deeper issue of what's really going on, because all of these things, like feeling like I'm never good enough, feeling like nothing I ever produce is good enough, feeling like there are way too many flaws, things take me way too long, and all of these things, they have a deeper root cause on why they're there, right? So we could go straight into trying to fix it, trying to optimize to the absolute max, like things like time management and prioritizing, and what else could we do? We could amp up accountability, for example. There are to do things in a certain time frames. I know that there are a couple of websites online where you can literally bet against yourself, and you make a bet that you, I don't know, do something in a certain time frame, and then you give them money, and if you actually do the thing in the time frame you get the money back, and if you don't, you lose it. I think there is like another person that you need to have. There is an outer accountability, so that you can just say you did it even though you didn't do it, you know. And I'm not saying that any of that is terrible. If that works for you, that's incredible, but you know what I mean. Like, this is a thinking, and I personally have tried to be very harsh with myself, and you know, then you get into this thought cycle of beating yourself up, right? It's like you were, for example, for me, like I'm editing or doing something, and I'm noticing that it is taking me a lot longer than anticipated, and I'm not going to have the video finished for next Sunday, and it's like Saturday evening at like 10 p.m. or so, and I'm still editing, and I get so angry at myself. And then, you know, the next step would be to recognize that this is the first time I'm doing that. I'm doing like a whole tutorial of something I've never done before, and it's, you know, instead of being happy that I'm trying to do this or something, like the mind goes into, oh, you're not good enough. Oh my God, you're so slow. Why are you so slow? You've been so slow with everything you've ever done. And, you know, I don't even know why you try, because it's not going to get a good result anyway. And then we just, like, I tend to just go down these cycles, and it's not good. Like, it's not helpful. It's not healthy. I don't want it anymore. And it's so interesting, really, the ways that it comes out, because, like I said, for a good portion, like I've already transformed a lot of these beliefs, but there are certain aspects where they're still there. It's also the all or nothing approach that comes with it when it's trying to do something. That is another factor that is important here, where with editing as well, it's like, okay, either I do one video a week and I do this, or I do nothing for a month, you know. Maybe you can relate when you're trying to build some healthier habits for anything. It's like, I mean, we are in the beginning of the year, already 2 months in. A lot of you probably had some New Year's resolutions about maybe working out, but we always make this change, we make it so big, you know, where we are like telling ourselves that yes, we're gonna work out like 6 times a week for an hour each, when before we did maybe 1 hour or so. And it's a very harsh approach towards ourselves that we tend to have, and I would like to soften it up. So the real question is, why am I thinking this way? Why am I believing a voice in my head? And this is integral part already, saying that why am I believing this voice inside my head that I'm not good enough? Why am I believing the voice inside my head that I'm moving too slow? Why is nothing ever good enough? And where does this voice come from? Because, you know, there is a root there, like there is an experience or several experiences where this started, like where I got the idea, and I've got the idea a couple of times that it implemented into my mind, that now I'm still like living in this cycle. So if that at all sounds familiar to you in any sense whatsoever, don't stress about it too much. Don't be perfectionist about trying to clear it out. I know I say that with a smile on my face, because I know that's not easy. This is about progress, not perfection. I hate that sentence as much as you do probably, but it is actually true, and it is actually helpful. So I do have a few questions that I would like to ask you, or I would like you to ask yourself if you're up for it. And I'm going to ask these questions, and then I'm going to answer them just, you know, like how I'm experiencing this right here, right now. And maybe this will help you as well. Before we even get into this, I would like to say that there is no amount of telling yourself how stupid you are and how incapable you are and how slow you are that is actually going to help you shift these behaviors within yourself. Because you're only going to be down further on yourself. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. So the question is, what can we do about it? How can we go about it? How can we gently support ourselves? According to my personal trial and error method to clearing this out, there are 4 steps to trying and clear out these thought patterns or these behaviors, or at least start working on them. because that's already better than just suffering from them. The first one, I have my book, my journal right here, so if I look down, it's only because I'm looking at what I've been writing down. The first one is to identify where these feelings or these behaviors show up, like which areas of your life are affected by it. Meaning, is it something that is primarily showing up in your work? Is it primarily showing up in your relationships, the way that you interact with other people? Is it showing up in new skills that you want to learn, for example, like if you want to build up healthy habits, implement an exercise regime, eating healthier for yourself, or where does this show up? And chances are, when we go a little bit further down the road as well, we notice if it's really this pattern of beating us down and telling ourselves that we're not good enough, and this like toxic mindset surrounding work of never doing enough, never being enough, good enough, all of this, chances are it shows up in a lot of different areas, in a myriad of different ways with like a lot of nuances. But don't freak out about it. You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to clear everything out overnight. And it's normal if it's a pattern that's been ingrained within yourself for a really long time for it to be there in a lot of different areas. And what we're doing here today is to find a gentle approach to slowly and gently unraveling the root causes of it, understanding why this behavior is there for us in the first place, and then looking at a way to support ourselves to get out of this. But it's not about changing everything at the same time and making a 180 shift and giving yourself too much to do, because that's not really gonna help you shift. It's about like small steps in one area of your life, the area of your life where you feel like it's easiest to do, and then just going from there. Yeah, this is not a mindset that popped up overnight. It's a mindset that has been there for a while, and it's something that took some time to implement, and it's the same like losing weight. You're not gonna lose it all overnight. And it's a process. Don't stress about it. And I know that is kind of funny to say in a video about having an overly perfectionist, toxic mindset surrounding work. But, we're trying to change that. So, the second question is, where do these feelings and behaviors show up? And here I would like you to get very observant with yourself in having either something like a journal where you write things down, or what can also help is, if you prefer voice memos, I think like every phone has a little app to record yourself. Just do that. Whenever you notice that, take yourself a week or even just try it for 2 days to see when this pops up. Because the first part of changing anything about yourself, any of your thought patterns, any of your behaviors, is first observing and understanding where exactly it pops up. Because after a while, you're going to start seeing a little pattern there. And what happens then is you're not emotionally invested in it in the same way that you were before, because you already have you took a step back and you have an observant view on it. And that means a little bit of detachment to this feeling, to this thought, right? Yes, okay. That's the second question. The third step is to look at where the root cause is. And this is where the money is. And I know it's not easy, but listen, without this step and without actually looking at this, we're just treating symptoms here, and we're not looking at the root cause, and the same issue would pop up in a slightly adjusted, slightly different way in a different area. All right, so this is an important one. Of course, because this is where the money is, it can potentially be triggering depending on where this started for you. And always be responsible for yourself. If you feel like, or you touch on something, or you've sensed that there's something very, very heavy for you to work through, reach out to a therapist if you can. I believe almost every country also has a helpline where you can call and get some first help. I'm gonna leave the one for Germany down below because that's where I'm located, but do some research, right? So that if there's something that pops up that is too heavy for you, you do have somebody that will help you work your way through this. Yeah, so always be responsible about this. And the fourth step is, what can I do in order to let go of this belief, and how can I best support myself while I'm clearing this out? And I feel like the word support is actually key here, because most of the time we identify something about ourselves that we don't like, and then we like to throw a 180 on this and try to implement huge changes that are not very sustainable, that are further punishing ourselves. For example, if you want to lose a lot of weight, instead of having a sustainable approach, we would like to do some drastic action to change things as fast as possible because we feel so guilty and we feel so shameful surrounding that, right? But if we think about crash diets where you lose a lot of weight, most of the time it's water weight anyway, but we lose a lot of weight because we go on these extreme diets and these extreme exercise regimes. Most of the time people end up gaining everything back. And a lot of the times even more than before, yeah? So when it comes to changing your mindset, it's a similar approach. You telling yourself that you're not allowed to feel this perfectionist, or you're not allowed to think this thought, and beating yourself down is not helpful, because what you're going to do is then you're beating yourself down for beating yourself down, you know? So it's not good. So let's look at this. And then afterwards, of course, is the question of, what am I going to do about this now? Like, what am I going to do? How can I set myself up? Now let's go through the 4 steps, and I'm going to tell you a little bit from my perspective, like how this all comes out in my personal life. Okay, time to get up and open and personal, which is why I brought you a bit closer. To be honest with you, this part of the video I am least looking forward to filming right now, only because I'm trying to be very open and this is a bit scary. Okay, so bear with me. First question is, which area, again, my journal here, which area do these feelings or these behaviors show up? And I already shared a little bit with you about that, like little stories. I would say it's most potent for me whenever I am trying to build a new skill. Or when I'm doing something new. And last year I shifted careers completely. I shifted into a completely different field. So basically everything I was doing was new, and that's where it showed up a lot in the beginning. Not anymore, because I'm somebody I learned by doing, so I like to fling myself into new things. Ironically, even though this is a fear of mine, I like to fling myself into new things and just, learn by doing, work my way through this, work my way into it. And I'm actually quite good at learning very, very quickly and working my way quickly into new groups or fields or any of that sort. But that's when it's most potent, or that's when it shows up the most. Like I said as well with the editing, for example. It's like anytime I'm doing something new, that's when it really, really pops up. Obviously, because anything new you're doing, you're gonna take a little while until you build the skill, until you learn how to do that, until you know exactly how to do and what to do. So obviously, for somebody that has an overly perfectionist mindset, that is the most difficult thing to master, right? That's why it doesn't show up as much for sewing for me anymore, because I've been sewing since 2009. Like, I know the drill. Like, the clothes that I make, if you look at them, they look like I bought them in the store. That's the level of finishing that I've reached by now. But that's like after all of these years. Right? So that makes a lot of sense that it pops up whenever I'm doing something new. So I would say that's the area, and that is that sounds like a very broad area, and it is a broad area, because whenever I'm doing something new, it's literally in every area that I'm doing something, right? That is in implementing new healthy habits. It's in implementing new things at work. It's at implementing or producing different and new content, like learning anything, any new skill, that's where it really pops up for me. Because I know I cannot, I'm not gonna be the best at it. When you just start out doing something or building up a skill, learning something or whatever, you're not gonna be perfect. And there's this beautiful German phrase that I'm going to implement here, which is, es ist noch kein Meister vom Himmel gefallen, which basically translates to, there has, like, no master has ever fallen out of the sky, which is basically anybody that you see that is doing very well at what they're doing, they have built up their skill over a lot of period of time that you have not seen. If you go to the museum, you look at paintings like that are very, very detailed. Like, they didn't just wake up one day and started to paint like this. They've actually built up their skill to paint like this, right? Same principle. But we like to judge ourselves, and me personally as well, I like to judge myself against, like, my starting point against somebody's, I don't know, 3-year in journey or something like this. And it doesn't, also from a logical standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is feeling based, so it's not really logical, is it? Okay, so this is the area where it shows up most. Let's go to the second question. How do these thoughts and behaviors show up? Like, how do they portray themselves? And this is much more detailed. If you have done a little, or if you will do a little like journaling session with this, and you notice it and you're going to write it out for a while, possibly you will find a little pattern. There's like a little core, like a sentence that you will tell yourself more often than others. And for me, the sentence that I hear most often or most frequent is that I cannot do anything right. I can't do anything right. That's the number one thought pattern that I have when it comes to this behavior, when it shows up. It's like, I can't do anything right. There are a lot of variations of this, like a lot of variations of this, but this is at the core. This is at the core. This is the core thought, I can't do anything right. And let's go to the third question, which is the money question. Where is the root cause of this? Where did this thought show up first in my life, or what do I remember? When does it show up? Where is the root cause of this? So for me, it's like the thought of, I can't ever do anything right. And like I said before, this is where the true transformation can take place. Be responsible. Do ask somebody else for help in guiding you through this question if you want to. If you feel the need to, please do that. You're not weak. Some things are just very, very heavy to work through by yourself. So a bit of help can go a long way. And you'd be surprised how many people are actually there to help you if you start to reach out. So at least from my experience, asking for help was very difficult, but once I started, like, I was surprised by the amount of support that I found. So, you know, be good to yourself always. So the question, where does this thought comes up? Well, for me, that is, I think, the number one sentence I've heard when I was growing up. Right when I'm about to get into the nitty-gritty of it, my camera decided to drop out. She was like, I'm not ready. Okay, so let's get to it. The question was, where's the root cause of me thinking that I can't ever do anything right? And this is getting a bit heavy. I'm letting you know in advance there might be a trigger warning here. Concerning abuse, actually, so if you're not ready to listen to that, I'm going to be gentle about it, obviously. I'm going to go full into detail about it, but if you are in a mindset today where you feel like this would be too much, don't bother. You can skip ahead to the next chapter where we're talking about how you can gently support yourself through this, and come back to this part if you want to at any time, or just skip it altogether. You don't really need it, right? Do your own questions. You will be golden, and I will pick you back up again next time. Okay, so for those of you that are still here and that are curious to hear, I think for me this is the number one sentence, I can't ever do anything right. It's the number one sentence I've learned and listened to when I was growing up. I actually can't remember when it started, because it started so early in my life. It was in my immediate surroundings, and it did mess me up a lot, because when you're a child, you're picking up every single piece of your identity, your view on the world, your view on yourself, your skills, how you see the world, how the world sees you. Everything is getting mirrored back in the beginning of your life, right? And this sort of shapes how you see yourself, how you see the outside world and everything. So if already there in the very, very beginning there is such a thought being implemented in you, it's not gonna be easy for you going forward. I'm just gonna say it like this. And for me, it was the number one thing that I heard, and I dealt with it in the way where I recognized that I could never do anything right. So I took the approach of not really trying a lot. I was just like, oh, well, what's the point? Like if I can't do anything right, like why try at all? So that was a sort of a way to protect myself. That's also why it took me a very long time to start an Instagram as well, because I felt like I was never good enough. Like I didn't sell good enough, didn't sell well enough, and there are a million different areas in my life and a million different scenarios in my life that I could pinpoint to and say like, yeah, this helped me back there because I learned it so early. And it's very interesting because it's not, like for me, there was one person that told me this repeatedly, but it was also showing up in the behaviors of other people. And what's interesting there is I know that these people, like, they didn't mean it in that sense. That was not the message that they wanted to send me, but because my mind was so focused on this and that this was sort of like the lens that I saw everything through, that was the message that I've gotten a lot more than necessary, actually. So to give you one example, I have a background in history of art, and I started doing exhibitions, organizing exhibitions and like working in exhibitions, and I loved it. I was also very good at this. And when I started with this, for example, I remember my parents were visiting me in the town that I was living in at the time, and it was like a 10-minute ride away, like 10 minutes. And technically they had the time to go there and look at this, but they never bothered to. And they've actually never seen any of the exhibitions that I've done. Even if they were, and a couple of times they were in town and they could have seen it, and they've never seen it, So I always got this like subliminal message of not being good enough because it's not worthy to go and look at. And as well with sewing, I have like one memory that's imprinted in my mind where I made somebody a gift. I've sewn a pair of pants for them, and I was not seeing this person like physically, so I couldn't take my own measurements, and basically I got some measurements, but I highly doubt that the people were taking them correctly, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to measure it right, obviously. So I had already some shaking grounds to work off of, and I made a pair of pants, and it was some stretchy materials, and I had to adjust the waistband a tiny bit, because with stretchy materials it's difficult to know how it behaves once it starts to stretch, because it doesn't stretch at the same time as well as recovery, right? You stretch it and it just goes back after washing, but you need to know how much it stretches while you're wearing it in order to know how tight you need to make the pants, right? Because you're accounting for it to get wider. But there are ways to figure it out ahead of time, but at that moment in sewing, I couldn't do that, and I've made a stellar pair of pants, and I needed to adjust it, and was met by a rage fit of how I can't even do sewing right. The message as well, just to give you one example, was where it came up that I'm not allowed to make any mistakes, because if I made any mistakes, I was verbally severely punished for it, really badly. We're talking about verbal abuse here, and then it would go into a full-on rage mode, why I can't do anything right, and going through every single aspect of my personality, my looks, all of it that were flawed from their perspective. Yeah, important to say, from their perspective. I have a different perspective on this now, so we are fine, but that's why this thought is so ingrained into everything that I'm doing. Even if I did something incredibly well, it was still not good enough. So it was like a goalpost that I could never reach. It was like a goalpost that was constantly moved with like an indefinite space into perfection, because we all know perfection is an idea, is an ideal that can never be reached. It's not possible. It's not possible to do something perfectly, because there will always be a little something that you could improve somewhere. Perfection doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So if that's your standard, or if that's the standard that has been set for you, it's inherently something that you can never reach. You can never fulfill this ideal. I badly needed to hear it a few years ago, or while growing up. Nobody ever told me, but I feel like this is an integral aspect. Like, perfection can never be reached. Like, it is an unreachable standard to set. For yourself, for others, doesn't exist. Very, very good exists. Like, incredibly good, yes. Exceptional, yes. Perfect doesn't exist. Okay. So, because of that, there was like making a mistake and gaining a lot of like proper abuse for it. Like, for me it was verbal, emotional, psychological, quite gruesome. I'm not going to go into details for this at all, but you know, there was like a lot of punishment when I did something wrong, and if I did something right, it was still not good enough because the goalpost was just moved. And that is like, you know, for like emotional, verbal abuse and stuff like this, psychological abuse, that's like one of the hallmarks where, you know, it's like, it's a box that, it's like sitting in a box that gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It doesn't matter if you do things right, because you can never reach whatever is supposed to be reached, because that's the whole point of you, like trying to keep you as small as possible, like making you feel like you're slowly drowning in a sense, and as well as like making you dependent on somebody else. There's like a whole topic here, as you can already tell, that I'm not going to dive into this video. I'm getting hungry. But if you're curious about this, or you're in a situation like this yourself, do let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to give you some resources to maybe help you out or help you understand, or if you have any other question, like, feel free to always leave it down below. Let's get back to the topic. I remember I was in competitive sports, and I remember doing like making a shot, and I saw my dad standing there, and I missed the shot. Like, I didn't do it perfectly, and I remember him standing there. It's like an image that I have ingrained in my mind. Like, I see him standing there, like with his arms crossed and like his face hardening a bit, and like the mouth like tightening a little bit, because I didn't make the shot. And there are a lot of different memories that I have in my mind, like different variations of where this got mirrored back to me. And like I said, like, it doesn't mean that like all of these people are evil and like nobody appreciated me. Like, you know, it's not about this. Like, the initial person that said this to me very frequently, yes, they don't appreciate me, not a good person, should not ever take advice from them ever. But I was a kid, you know, so I didn't, like, that's not how that works. You don't have the reflective state at this point in your life where you can do that. So, you know, it's like when I was growing up, then I started to look for evidence to prove this thought pattern, to prove this belief that I'm not good enough. And it makes sense, because when you're growing up, and if this is around you, you sort of, in order for your world to make sense, you are placing a lot of value, like what others around you tell you is the truth. And you're measuring the world surrounding you based on this. Like, these people, like, this is right, this is your core belief, this is what you know, this is what you've been taught. So you go ahead and you go through your life and you look for confirmation of this. So all of these memories, and it's like layers as well. It's like, this is the base layer of the thought, like the first time that they told me that I'm not good enough and I can't do anything right. And it's just like all of these other experiences I like caked on top, like they accumulate like layers. So when if you do that question and you ask yourself that question, if you start digging into it, it doesn't mean that you will like have one like root cause that you can identify. It's much more likely that there will be a lot of different memories that you have, like a lot of different people that said something similar or gave you the feeling that you are not good enough, or that your work is not good enough, that you need to try harder, you need to do better. All of these different things are usually accumulating, you know. It doesn't mean, like I said, these people most of the time, they don't mean it that way. It's like the filter through which we hear things sometimes as well. So, you know, it's not about identifying these situations in order to accuse anybody. You're looking at these behaviors and at these situations in order to identify and understand why you might think that this is the truth. Because as well, with a thought or with something that we hear over and over and over and over again, eventually it seeps into our mind and we start to believe it, right? If you hear something once, if you hear an opinion from somebody once, it's very easy to determine for yourself that it's not true. But if you hear it a lot of different times, mirrored back at you from a lot of different sources, your mind starts to think, maybe, you know, they might be right, and then it starts to accumulate, right? The problem with the thought is never the thought itself. It's like our attachment to it is us believing this thought. You know, it's the emotional weight that we put behind it. Because if it was just some thought that we wouldn't believe, we wouldn't have a problem. We would never think that we're not good enough. It's just the problem that we're believing somebody at some point gave us this idea that we're not good enough, and we start to believe it, and that's where the problems come in. So in order to do that, it's about like gradually detaching from it, but we will get to this in the next question. What I want to say about this as well is, depending on what this thought is about you, like I could talk a lot more about the details behind it and like where, like all of the nuances where this thought plays out, where it came out, other thoughts that have been implemented, because like I said, we are talking more about an emotionally and verbal abusive, like also psychologically abusive situation. There are a lot of different beliefs that I've had that I've managed to transform about myself and shift out and work through a very, very long period of time. And if you are in a similar situation right now, like I would love to give you a massive hug, and I'm you from the future. Like I know that you can do that. I know it seems very daunting, and I'm getting a bit teary-eyed because I feel like I'm talking to a younger version of myself. It's fine. Like it doesn't change overnight. Like this is a process. You start where you are, and then you just step by step you start to build it up. Like there's no need to make yourself feel even worse than you already do. You know? It's about bit by bit. So wherever this is, usually it will probably be a painful memory for you. So be very gentle with yourself. If you do the journaling exercise by yourself and you feel like you're ready to do this question by yourself, make sure that you're in a calm environment. If you can, you know, listen to some gentle music, make yourself a tea. Afterwards, go outside, go for a walk, like whatever you need to do some stretching. Just be very, very gentle with yourself when you start diving into this. And as well, if you start doing this and nothing really comes up for you, or it's a bit diffuse where you can't really pinpoint it, don't worry about it. You started to stir the pot by asking the question, see what comes up. Right? It doesn't have to be sitting down and answering these questions in one go. You can start and just have the page, you know, mark a whole page, 3 pages for it, however much you want. And then just whenever something comes up and you notice something new, start to write it down. So, you know, the observant point is the most important aspect of it, like I said before. And looking at the root cause and at the situations in your life where this first popped up is really just understanding why it's there in the first place. Because when you understand why it's there in the first place, then you can start to challenge. You can start to challenge if these people or if the circumstances where it popped up was really actually called for. Because, you know, it's good to question. It's good to question this. Which leads us to step number 4, which is what can I do about it and how can I best support myself through this while changing the belief. First, I want you to take a moment and actually be proud of yourself for just asking these questions, for having the courage to dive deep into your memories, into your mind, into trying to unravel and into embarking on the journey of trying to change that, because it's not easy. A lot of people have some issues surrounding these topics, and most of them are too scared to even look in the first place, to look at what's there and rather stay put and project like negative habits onto other people and negative behaviors onto other people. So you're already a step ahead and you're already doing wonderful for just starting. That's the first part. The first feel-good part of this, because like I said, it's a gentle approach, yeah? The second aspect is to understand when you're shifting your thoughts or when you're shifting a thought pattern, you're not going to shift it overnight. This will take time, this will take continuous effort, and you're not going to go from I can't do anything right, or I hate my work, or I hate what I'm producing, I'm not good enough with anything that I'm producing. You're not going to go from this to I absolutely love, I'm the best at it overnight. Yeah, you're going to do like little tiny steps, tiny shifts of focus, because that's what we're doing. We're shifting, slowly shifting the focus. For me, the most important thing in this is to not look straight for the flaws, is to start shifting and noticing even when I see the flaws, then to as well look at something and notice something that I've done right. You know, so it's good to have sort of like if you have a scale and you have these weights, to have like some counterbalance. Bring some weight in for counterbalance, some positive weight for counterbalance. And that means focusing on something that went right, something that you did better, something that went well, something that you did a good job at. For example, if you are a sewist and you're doing something and you're having a hard time, notice that maybe this time you've sewn the seam a bit straighter, or it was a bit easier, or you set the sleeve in with less folds. Right? Because setting in sleeves is not easy, or any other aspect, you know, there's like always something that you've done a bit smoother than you did last time. So focus your attention on the smaller things that you've done a bit better and actively praise yourself for it. And I know this is difficult. For example, something that I've done that I'm also doing right now again, because like I said, it's popping up with the editing, is that I have a little book right next to my bed, and I'm writing like before I go to bed, or when I'm in bed, before I go to sleep, I write down some things that I've done well today. I know this sounds like something really, really small, but with all of the small stuff, that's where you're really going to start changing, because what this does is you lie in bed, you write out something either that you're grateful for, which gratitude practice is always great, but something that you're celebrating that day, something that you've done well in today. And that doesn't have to be a massive thing of being like, yeah, I worked out for an hour today, I've edited for 3. It's not about this. It's just the fact that you sit down and you do something for yourself. It can be, today I went for a 10-minute walk. Today, when I was editing, I found the right music and I implemented the song, and it looks well. It sounds good. I'm happy with it. It's exactly the vibe that I want to convey. You know, with work, it's like, okay, so today I had a meeting with a client and I've asked better questions than I did last time because I'm more prepared, or I have more experience. You know, like all of these things, all of these smaller things can be as well. For a snack today, I had an apple. Like, you know, whichever, put it in your situation, whichever, write it down every evening and be diligent about this. Like, give yourself 10 minutes to do that and then look at this and be happy. What this does as well is it starts to shift your perspective, because when you do that, after doing that for a while, but you need to be really consistent with it in the beginning. After doing this for a while, what it will do is it will shift your perspective that you have in your daily life, where you are more prone to noticing when you do something right while you're doing it. So there's like a small perspective shift there. You can also do some pep talks for yourself. If this feels very foreign, where you're not like, I did amazing, you don't have to go from I can't do anything right to I do amazing. That's not really very realistic. If you can do that, teach me how. Please actually do. If you can do that, teach me how. For me, it was more like the first step was from going I can't do anything right to I can do some things right, even if not everything is perfect, even if not everything is right. So it's like little steps. It's like today I did this well. Today I did maybe 2 things well. Today I did maybe 3 things well. So like gradually you're shifting your focus. Gradually you're shifting your focus. For me, this small thought pattern shift helped actually the most, because over time I started to notice that I'm doing actually better than I thought it would. Second aspect that's very important is you are the one that needs to be happy with your work, not an outside source. You need to be happy with what you're doing, not somebody else. And what I mean by that is when you're overly critical and you learn that you can't do anything right and you're never good enough, you're measuring your own self-worth and your worth in general, what you're producing. You're measuring it from an outside perspective, from somebody else. You gave somebody else the ownership, somebody else had the agency in order to judge on whether or not what you're doing is good enough, without having any of the background information that you have about yourself. And this is an important step to take that back, because you are the one that is judging your work. You are the one that is in charge of what you're doing. You are the one that needs to be happy with what you're doing, because it's your life and it's your thing. So if you can tell yourself that it's shit, you can also tell yourself that it's good. But this second aspect of it is the one that takes the longest. It's the one that takes the longest. I think for me, like, lifetime achievement to get to this point of being the only one that I pay attention to. Like, I'm doing pretty good, but I would say lifetime achievement, maybe. Yeah. So this is the hardest. That's why, but like all of these smaller steps, like slowly shifting the thought patterns, it's not like having to reach that ultimate destination, right? It's about giving yourself more influence over your own life, over your own perspective on your work, over your own self-perception. That's important part, right? So it's not really important to reach this point of being detached from all outside judgment. It's not about this. It's about shifting and coming closer to yourself, so that you can see what you're doing well, you can see what you're doing better than you did before, and just honoring that. And putting more love into this. As far as shifting and doing these little habits to support yourself go, there are a lot of different ways, right? Like writing it down in the journal in the evening when all is done and you have a quiet moment is something that can work for you. You can also do that while you're working. If you notice you do something, if it's very difficult for you to lie in bed and then look back through the day because your negativity bias is so strong, sit down and objectively look at what you're doing. Have an objective, like from an outside source, somebody that doesn't know your background story. That helps me as well. Somebody that doesn't have a background of all of your chatters, like somebody that looks at the thing that you're making or what you're doing from the very first time. they wouldn't be as critical as you are because they don't have the mental chatter and they don't have the same lens as you do. They look at this for the first time. So if, for example, you are making your first video, somebody that knows that this is your first video and looks at this will be like, oh, cool, they're learning a new skill. Oh, it's pretty cool. Oh, I like that shot. That shot looks pretty good. Yeah, okay. So maybe sound could be a bit better, but you know, pretty good. Oh, that was cute. Oh, see, now they're smiling. They are looking like they're really, like they're a nice person. You know what I mean? Like, have this perspective on what you're doing. Try and have this perspective on what you're doing. That can really help with being overly critical, because as well, nobody's looking at anything that we're doing with the same intensity that we do. Nobody will have the same perfectionistic view on the things that we're making like we do. You know, we judge ourselves far more than anybody else would. So it's good to have, like, take a couple of steps back there. Third thing you could do that is important thing to address is check your expectations and check your goals. Because what are the expectations that you have of yourself? Like, write them out. Write them out and look at them, and then see if maybe you can soften up a bit. For me, for example, when we take the editing aspect, is where I can't even verbalize what I'm expecting of myself. I just know that whatever I'm producing, that's not it. So that's already not a good starting point, is it? It's like I'm giving myself a literally unreachable standard. There's no finish line that I'm putting there. So what good is it to give myself a standard that I can't even verbalize? That's the first thing. Second thing, if it's a standard that is like I compare myself, for example, to somebody that has been editing videos for 10 years. And this is my standard of reaching perfection for my first few videos as well. Reality check. It's not very realistic, right? I can aspire to that, but I can aspire to that in 10 years. I can measure up now and see where I'm now. I would have to find some videos from that person from 10 years ago and look at this and compare. But even then, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because we all build skills in different ways, right? So it's more like compare yourself to somebody else that was starting out. Look at what they're doing. If you want to find some inspiration, only look at it for inspiration, not to judge yourself against their first tries, obviously. Look at their first tries to see they went from this to this. And recognize that by continually improving and gently working on things, you can do the same. So see where you're at. It's not the destination, it's your starting point. I feel like that's an important thing. Where you're at is your starting point, it's not your destination. The second part of checking your expectations is to check your goals as well. When you're starting out to do something or when you're doing something, set realistic goals. And when I say realistic, I can tell you about the most or the last habit that I implemented, because I'm thinking very small here. The last habit that I successfully implemented was to do daily meditation. And I enjoy meditating. It's just, I would get on the meditation wagon and do like 10 minutes a day for like 10 days or so, and then I would fall off again. Because I made the entry level and the starter goal for me way too high, where it was like, 15 minutes every day, and I did this and I did that, you know, and I just made it too difficult. I have been successfully meditating every day for about half a year now. Yeah, last summer I started, half a year-ish. And I meditate every day for 5 minutes. And I made it in a very, very small way. I just incorporated it into my daily routine. And every morning I have a coffee, I have a Bialetti, so it will be, you know, it's like the espresso maker that goes on the stove. So every morning when I wake up, I'm gonna have like a little bit of water, while the water in my boiler is boiling because I need a bit of water to my espresso. And then I'm making the Bialetti ready, I put it on the stove, and while it's cooking, I'm sitting down and I'm meditating for however long my coffee takes to cook, to get ready, you know? And this is the entry level of this is so small, and it's coupled with something that I'm doing anyway, that this really helped me. So anything that you want to shift, anything that you want to implement, make it very small. Don't tell yourself that you want to do like 10 minutes of affirmations every day when it's very difficult, when you tried that approach before and it was very difficult for you to do. Do smaller, right? So that you can incrementally start to build up. And I want to take a moment and talk about the mindset behind this, why I said support yourself. You are not fighting against yourself. You're not fighting against getting rid of this thought. You're not fighting against any of that. You are supporting yourself into a healthier thought pattern, and you are healing yourself into a healthier way of being. You're supporting yourself, and that means that when you're trying to do your best, or to be your ideal self is different every day. Because every day is different, and the requirements of each day are different. The most important thing is that each day you give it a bit of effort, and you give it a bit of effort again and again. And it's not about being the most perfect, it's about the effort. Because with effort, even if you do a little, you do a little, you do a little, and little by little, it will become a lot. After you've started to support yourself, eventually what you will do is the fifth step that I haven't spoken about previously, is where you find a system that works for you, where you set up a healthy program, a healthy system, you're reframing your mind, and you find a system that works for you, a supportive system of thought and behaviors that are healthy for you. This is where I'm at. I'm experimenting a lot, and I'm having fun with it as well. And it's nice because the approach that I have to this is not that I need to be perfect or that I need to get it right. I'm telling myself that I'm experimenting and I'm trying to find the best setup. And that in itself takes a lot of the pressure out of doing the thing perfectly, because we can also mess ourselves up when we try to change things and then we slip up or something doesn't work out. We get very fast, we're very, very fast when it comes to judging ourselves then as well, right? And it's the same voice that comes in just through another door or the window, however you want to see it. And it's literally about experimenting. So I will try different things and I will try them out for like a week or a month and see what works. And if an approach works or a certain aspect of it works, I'm going to implement them. So because I'm in the middle of doing this, I would like to end things here for now. And if you're curious about finding out more or seeing how or exactly how I'm setting up my system, let me know in the comments below and I will get back to you whenever I figure it out exactly how my system looks like, because like I said, I'm trying things out. Some things worked, some things haven't, a lot of things haven't. But do let me know. And I know this was a bit different from my usual topic, and we will get back to sewing in the next video. One aspect about the editing that I will say is also to not give myself too much to do. So for me, for making videos, for example, a gentler approach where I can support myself is to also share part of the progress, where it doesn't have to be a finished garment in order to be a video, you know what I mean? So the next thing that I will be sewing is my collection jacket that I'm making with a detachable lining. I'm talking about this one here. And I will upload this in 2 parts, where I'm making the outer shell and then I'm making the tutorial for the detachable lining on the inside. You know, and I think this could be a good way for me to split up videos in order to not get overly critical of myself and to deal with the longer editing times that I have, because like I said, it's a skill that I'm learning. Let me know about your thoughts in the comment below, and have a wonderful rest of your day, Sunday or whichever day of the week that you're watching this, and be gentle with yourself. Do let me know though if this is something that you're working on yourself, how you're implementing, how you're going on. If you did any of the journaling questions, which I'm also going to leave in the description box down below for you to look at, or any approaches that worked for you. Like how did you go about changing this? If you've been successful, do let me know. I'm very curious to read, and I will see you again next time. Bye. This is harder than I thought. Wow.